One afternoon, the king brought her to a quiet part of the palace garden. A small fountain trickled gently, and the light of the sun glinted off the water. He took her hand and spoke softly. "You have brought something into my life that I never knew I was missing. Your presence, your kindness, your heart, they make everything brighter. I do not just admire you, I respect you. I want us to build a life together, not as a queen and king, but as partners, equals, and companions." Her heart swelled with emotion. She had never imagined that someone so powerful could value her in such a genuine way. She realized that love could be transformative, not just in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of understanding, support, and shared purpose. Tears came to her eyes as she nodded, feeling a deep sense of belonging, trust, and hope. And so, in the palace that had once seemed vast and overwhelming, the girl began to find her place not as someone to be hidden or overshadowed, but as a partner in love, wisdom, and shared dreams. Her life was changing in ways she had never imagined, and yet she felt ready, confident, and inspired. The connection she had discovered with the king was growing stronger each day, promising a future filled with possibilities, joy, and the kind of magical love that few people ever experience. Her journey from a quiet village girl, hidden by jealousy and fear, to someone valued, respected, and loved in the grand palace, was a story of courage, kindness, and the power of being true to oneself. And as the sun set over the palace, casting golden light across the gardens, she felt the promise of a new chapter, one that would continue to unfold with wonder, warmth, and love beyond measure. Life in the palace was becoming familiar to the girl, yet every day brought something new to learn and discover. The halls were still vast and grand, and the gardens stretched endlessly, but she had begun to move through them with confidence. She understood the rhythm of palace's life, the importance of listening, observing, and acting with kindness. But more than that, she had discovered her own strength. She realized that being gentle did not mean being weak, and that her humility and compassion were as powerful as any title or wealth. The king continued to be her guide, her friend, and her confidant. They spent hours walking through the gardens, discussing everything from the care of the plants to the lives of the villagers. He valued her thoughts and opinions, not just because she was wise beyond her years, but because she saw the world differently. She noticed the little things: the gardener's tired hands, the servant's quiet sadness, the lonely expression of a child in the palace. She brought these observations to the king, and together they found ways to help. The palace began to feel warmer, more alive, and more human because of her presence. Not everyone in the palace was pleased. Some of the courtiers and noblewomen whispered behind her back, jealous of her influence and position. They could not understand how a girl from a small village, who had once been hidden and overlooked, could hold the king's attention and admiration. They tried to undermine her by spreading rumors or questioning her knowledge. At first, these whispers made her nervous. She had never faced such hostility before, and the words stung. But she remembered the lessons she had learned in her village: kindness, patience, and resilience. She chose not to respond with anger, but with grace, allowing her actions to speak louder than their words. One afternoon, while walking through the palace corridors, she overheard a group of noblewomen speaking in hushed tones. "She does not belong here," one said. "The king should have chosen someone of our world, not a simple village girl," another added. "Her influence is dangerous. Who knows what ideas she brings with her?" The girl felt a pang of hurt, but she did not let it show. Instead, she continued her work, helping the children in the palace learn, tending to the gardens, and supporting the staff with small acts of kindness. Her strength grew, not from confrontation, but from the quiet knowledge that she was where she was meant to be. The king noticed her concern and took her aside. "Do not let them shake your heart," he said softly. "They see you through their own fears and envy. You are here because of who you are, not because of who they think you should be. Remember that your heart, your courage, and your kindness are what brought you here, and they are what will keep you strong." His words comforted her, reminding her that true confidence comes from within. She realized that the palace, with all its grandeur and politics, it was a place where she could still be herself. and that was a gift she would never take for granted. As time passed, the bond between the girl and the king deepened. They shared laughter, quiet conversations, and moments of reflection that strengthened their connection. He admired her honesty, her curiosity, and her ability to see the world with compassion. She admired his wisdom, his patience, and his genuine care for the people of his kingdom. Their love was not about grandeur or appearances. It was about understanding, respect, and a shared vision for a better life. Together, they dreamed of ways to help the kingdom, from improving education to supporting the poor and vulnerable. The girl also began to reflect on her sisters. She had not spoken to them much since leaving the village, and part of her wondered how they felt about her new life. She remembered the jealousy, the attempts to hide her beauty, and the coldness she had sometimes felt. But she also remembered their moments of care, however small. And she realized that holding on to anger would not serve anyone. She decided to forgive them quietly, understanding that their actions had come from fear and envy, not malice. Forgiveness became a way for her to find peace and continue growing into the person she was meant to be. Back in the village, the sisters struggled with mixed emotions. They had watched her rise from afar, heard stories of her kindness, her intelligence, and her growing influence in the palace. At first, they were angry and jealous, but over time, admiration began to replace envy. They began to realize that no scheme or jealousy could have hidden her light. Their attempts to keep her in the shadows had failed because she had qualities that could not be suppressed. Slowly, they began to see that her strength, courage, and kindness were what had brought her success, not chance or favoritism. The villagers themselves had started to see the girl as a symbol of hope and possibility. Mothers would tell their children about her, describing how she had remained humble and kind despite the challenges she faced. Young women found inspiration in her story, learning that true beauty and power come from character, courage, and compassion, not wealth or status. The girl's life had become a bridge between the palace and the village, showing that values learned in a simple life could thrive even in a world of grandeur. One evening, as the sun set over the palace, casting golden light over the gardens, the girl walked quietly along a path lined with flowering trees. She thought about the journey that had brought her here from the quiet village, hidden behind jealous sisters, to a palace filled with wealth, responsibility, and possibilities she had never imagined. She felt gratitude for every experience, for every challenge, and for every act of kindness that had shaped her heart. She realized that her life had changed not because of beauty alone, but because of courage, humility, and an unwavering commitment to being herself. The king joined her, holding a small bouquet of wild flowers he had picked from the palace gardens. "You have changed this place," he said, smiling warmly. "The palace feels more alive, more human because of you. Your heart, your kindness, and your strength inspire everyone around you." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride and humility. She realized that true influence is not about commanding attention, but about quietly making a difference, helping others, and remaining true to oneself as their conversations and walks continued. They began to plan ways to extend their influence beyond the palace. They discussed helping villages with education, healthcare, and resources. They talked about creating opportunities for young women, ensuring that kindness and intelligence were recognized and nurtured. The girl was amazed at how much they could accomplish together, and she felt a sense of purpose that filled her heart with joy. She realized that love could be transformative, not just in emotions, but in actions, ideas, and shared dreams. Despite the growing harmony, challenges persisted. There were moments when the political pressures of the palace became overwhelming, when courtiers questioned her every move, and when the weight of responsibility seemed too heavy. But she learned to navigate these challenges with grace. She remembered her village lessons: patience, understanding, and resilience. She learned to speak with confidence, to stand her ground when necessary, and to act with compassion even when others acted with jealousy or hostility. Her growth was slow but steady, and with each step, she became stronger, wiser, and more respected. One afternoon, a festival was held in the palace to celebrate the arrival of spring. The girl was invited to participate, and she decided to contribute in her own way. She helped organize activities for the children, arranged small performances by the palace staff, and ensured that everyone felt included. The festival was a success, filled with laughter, music, and joy. People noticed her thoughtful attention to detail and her genuine care for everyone involved. She lived in a small, quiet village surrounded by green fields and tall trees. It was the kind of village where everyone knew each other's names, and every face carried stories from the past. In this village, she had always been known as the gentle, kind-hearted girl who seemed to shine in a way that others could not. Her beauty was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It was not just the way her eyes sparkled or the softness of her hair, but the warmth she carried in her smile, the honesty in her voice, and the light that seemed to follow her wherever she went. People would often stop and stare, and even strangers passing through would remark about her presence. But despite all of this, she lived a quiet life. She did not seek attention or praise. She liked simplicity. She liked helping people, tending two animals, and walking through the village with a calm, gentle pace. Her family, however, had a different view. She had two older sisters who, for reasons that were difficult to explain even to themselves, could not bear to see her shine. They were beautiful in their own way, but hers was a beauty that made theirs seem dull in comparison. They tried in subtle ways to keep her hidden. At home, they would insist she stay indoors as much as possible. If they went to town or to festivals, they would cover her with plain clothes and make her walk behind them. They would tell her not to laugh too loudly, not to speak to strangers, and never to draw attention to herself. At first, she did as she was told, not understanding the envy behind their words. She simply wanted to live peacefully and be loved for who she was, not for how she looked. Despite the sisters' efforts, it was impossible to hide her entirely. There were moments when her kindness broke through every attempt to conceal her. She had a way of seeing people who were struggling and offering help without anyone asking. If a neighbor's child fell down and scraped a knee, she would be the first to pick them up, clean the wound, and comfort them with gentle words. If an elderly villager needed help carrying water or firewood, she would quietly lend her hands. People began to notice that the girl who seemed hidden in the shadows of her family was the one whose heart was truly pure. The villagers whispered stories about her. Some said she had a magic about her, though not the kind of magic that comes from spells or charms. It was the kind of magic that came from goodness, from being genuinely kind, from seeing the world not as it was, but as it could be. Children loved to follow her as she walked through the village, holding hands and giggling. Farmers would leave extra vegetables at her door just as a way to be near her. Even animals seemed drawn to her presence. Cats would curl at her feet, dogs would wag their tails in her direction, and birds would sing more sweetly when she passed by. She had a daily routine that was simple but meaningful. She would wake up with the first light of dawn, step outside into the cool morning air, and walk to the river to fetch water. The river was calm in the morning, and as she walked along its banks, she would often talk softly to herself or hum gentle tunes. Her sisters sometimes mocked her for this, calling her foolish for singing alone, but she did not care. The river was her friend, and the forest beyond it was her secret place where she could dream freely. She would spend hours picking herbs, talking to the animals, and feeling connected to the world around her. At home, the sisters continued their quiet sabotage. They would speak behind her back, saying that no one should know of her beauty, that it would bring trouble. They worried that suitors would come, or that someone important would notice her and take her away. They were not cruel in an obvious way, but their envy was like a heavy weight, pressing down on her life, making her doubt her own worth. She often wondered why they could not see her for who she really was. She tried to please them, to follow their rules, and to avoid causing any conflict. She wanted peace, not arguments. But peace in their house was always fragile. Even with the constant pressure at home, she never lost her spirit. She found joy in the smallest of things. A butterfly landing on a flower could make her heart leap. A kind word from a neighbor would fill her day with warmth. She loved reading old stories from books she borrowed from the village library. She loved painting simple scenes of the village, the river, and the forest, capturing their beauty and colors. It was these small acts of living fully that kept her light shining, even when her sisters tried to dim it. One day, while she was walking through the village square, carrying baskets of fruit for a neighbor, she noticed a commotion near the town hall. Curious, she moved closer, careful not to draw too much attention. There were travelers in the square, dressed in rich fabrics, and speaking in voices that carried authority. The villagers murmured nervously, some bowing deeply, some whispering in excitement. She could not hear everything, but she caught fragments of words. Royal visit. King. Searching for a maiden. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept walking quietly. Hoping not to be noticed, her sisters, who were nearby, spotted her instantly. Panic flashed across their faces. They knew what this meant. If the king's attention fell on her, all their efforts to keep her hidden would be useless. They grabbed her roughly by the arms, pulling her back toward their home, whispering sharp words. Stay inside. Do not look. Do not speak. No one must see you. She obeyed, though her heart ached. She did not understand why they feared the world seeing her. She only knew that she wanted to live her life peacefully, helping others and not causing trouble. That evening, she sat by the window, looking out at the fading light over the village. The square was quieter now, but her mind was alive with questions. Who was this king? Why was he searching for someone? Could it be possible that someone so far away could see what she saw in herself, that beauty was not just about appearance, but about the heart? She did not know the answers, but she felt a strange stirring of hope mixed with fear. The next few days were tense. Her sisters were more controlling than ever. They watched her every move, warning her about strangers, telling her she could not leave the house without their permission. But even in confinement, she found ways to shine. She helped her mother in the kitchen, prepared warm meals for the family, and even found ways to sneak small gifts to children in the village who needed a smile. Word began to spread quietly through those she helped, that there was a girl with a heart so pure that nothing could hide her light. One afternoon, a neighbor came by, an older woman with a kind face. She whispered to her carefully, so her sisters could not hear, "You are special. Your kindness and your heart are more beautiful than anything in the world. Do not let anyone make you believe otherwise." The words touched her deeply. She realized that even though her sisters tried to hide her, the world could not. Goodness and love have a way of reaching others. Even when we try to stay unseen, days turned into weeks, and the king's visit was soon to come. The village was buzzing with anticipation. People were preparing their homes, decorating the streets, and talking excitedly about the possibility of meeting royalty. She watched quietly from her home, unsure if she would be noticed, but a small part of her dared to hope. She wondered if this could be a chance to show the world who she really was, not just a girl hidden by her sisters, but someone with a heart that cared for others. Someone who had always tried to bring light wherever she could. On the morning of the king's arrival, the village square was filled with people. She tried to stay in the background, dressed plainly, with her hair tied back simply. Her sisters watched nervously, whispering warnings and holding her close. But as she walked past the crowd to fetch water from the fountain, she stumbled slightly, and her basket tipped. Apples rolled across the cobblestones. She bent down quickly to gather them, not noticing that someone was approaching. The king, who had been walking through the square with his entourage, saw her at that moment. She was not posing or trying to attract attention. She was simply being herself, bending over to pick up fallen fruit with care and grace. His eyes widened, and for a moment he stood still, captivated. There was something in the way she moved, in the way she cared for the smallest things, that made him stop in his tracks. He had seen many people in his life, many beautiful women, but none had touched him in the way this girl did. She seemed real, kind, and genuine, unlike anyone he had met before. She looked up, startled, and their eyes met. She did not recognize him at first, but there was a strange familiarity, a feeling that something important was happening. He smiled gently, and she felt a warmth she had never felt before. It was as if the world had suddenly opened up to her, even though her sisters tried to hold her back. And in that moment, something shifted. An invisible connection had begun. One that neither of them could explain, but both could feel deeply. Even as her sisters tried to pull her away, the king stepped closer, speaking to her in a calm voice that carried authority but also kindness. "Do not fear," he said. "I only wish to speak with you. You have a light that cannot be hidden even by those closest to you." She was nervous, unsure what to say, but something in his eyes reassured her. She realized that perhaps life had plans for her far beyond the small village, beyond the control of her sisters. And so, the story of the hidden girl, the one who had always lived quietly and helped others without seeking recognition, began to change. She did not yet know what lay ahead, but the first step had been taken. The world had noticed her in the most extraordinary way. The seed of something magical had been planted, a connection that would grow into a love that neither envy nor fear could ever hide. She returned home that evening, her heart racing with excitement and fear, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in her life, she felt hope. Hope that she could live freely, hope that her kindness and her heart would be recognized, hope that she could be herself without fear of jealousy or control. She did not yet know how her life would change, but she felt ready to face it, whatever came next. And so, in the quiet village surrounded by green fields and tall trees, a hidden gem prepared for the first steps of a journey that would take her far beyond what she had ever imagined, into a world where love, kindness, and magic would meet. The day after the king had noticed her in the village square, the girl could hardly sleep. Her mind was full of questions, thoughts, and a strange fluttering feeling she had never experienced before. She could not stop thinking about the man who had seen her, truly seen her, in a way that no one else had ever done. She did not know why he had come, or why he had looked at her with such interest, but she felt a spark of something extraordinary, a sense that her life was about to change. Her sisters, meanwhile, were restless and nervous. They whispered constantly, trying to decide how to protect themselves and their reputation. They could not understand why the king, a man of great power, would be interested in their younger sister. They feared the attention, not just for their family, but for themselves. They spent the morning arranging their household, making it seem as if their youngest sister had done nothing noteworthy. They even tried to hide her presence by keeping her in the kitchen or behind closed doors. But their efforts were slow, and the girl, despite her fear of angering them, could not stay hidden entirely. Her heart told her that something important was happening. She could not ignore it. When the scouts from the king arrived at the village to meet her, she was surprised and scared. They had come to invite her to the palace to meet the king properly. She had never left her village before except for small walks through the nearby forest. She had never imagined being called to a palace, to a life she had only read about in stories. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The scouts were kind, respectful, and patient. They spoke gently, explaining that the king had noticed her and wished to see her. But they also reassured her that nothing would happen without her consent. Her sisters watched with fear and jealousy as she spoke with the scouts. They tried to convince her to refuse, to stay safe in the village, and to continue living quietly as before. "You do not need this," they said. "We have a life here. You are safe. Do not be foolish." The girl listened politely, but inside, she felt a growing courage. She realized that staying hidden her entire life would never allow her to see what the world had to offer. She thought about all the people she had helped quietly, all the moments she had spent dreaming of a life beyond her home, and she felt a pull she could not ignore. The journey to the palace was unlike anything she had ever imagined. She rode in a carriage, surrounded by grandeur, with guards and attendants ensuring her safety. As the village disappeared behind her, she felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation. She missed her simple home, the river, the forest, and even the roughness of her village life. Yet she also felt a deep sense of wonder. She looked out the window at the changing landscape, the forests giving way to rolling hills, and then 2 fields lined with tall stone walls. It was a journey into a world she had only dreamed of. Each moment made her heart beat faster. When they reached the palace, she was struck by its magnificence. Towers rose high into the sky, walls were covered with intricate carvings, and gardens stretched as far as the eye could see. The scouts guided her carefully, explaining the rules of the palace and how she should conduct herself. She listened, taking in every word, but her mind kept wandering to the king. What would he be like? Would he be kind, or strict, or distant? She had no idea, yet a strange certainty grew inside her. This man had seen something in her that others had not, and that was a feeling she could trust. When she first met the king, she was nervous. He stood tall, regal, and calm, but there was a softness in his eyes that immediately put her at ease. He spoke gently, introducing himself and asking about her life in the village. She answered with honesty, telling him about the river, the forest, the animals, and the people she cared for. She spoke about her family and her sisters, though carefully, not wanting to sound ungrateful or negative. The king listened with patience, nodding, and asking thoughtful questions. He did not interrupt or judge, but seemed genuinely interested in every word she said. As they spent more time together, she began to relax. She noticed small things about him that were surprising. He laughed easily, enjoyed simple stories, and seemed curious about the world beyond his palace. He asked her about the villagers, about her daily routines, and even about her small dreams. She realized that he was not like other men she had heard about or read about in stories. He did not treat her as an object of beauty, but as a person with thoughts, feelings, and a life of her own. She felt a warmth growing in her heart, sensed that perhaps this connection was more than just chance. Days passed, and their meetings became longer. Sometimes they walked in the palace gardens, talking quietly about flowers, the changing seasons, and the animals in the courtyard. Sometimes they sat in the palace library, sharing stories and reading together. She found herself laughing more than she had ever laughed, feeling a sense of freedom she had never known. The king, too, seemed transformed by her presence. Courtiers whispered about the unusual bond forming between them. It was clear to everyone that their connection was not ordinary. Despite the growing closeness, the girl remained humble. She did not let the grandeur of the palace change who she was. She remembered the simple lessons of her village: kindness, honesty, and humility. She treated the servants and guards with respect, helped children in the palace learn, and even found ways to improve the gardens and care for the animals. People began to admire her not just for her beauty, but for her character. The palace, once a place of strict rules and distance, began to feel warmer, lighter, and more alive because of her presence. Her sisters, back in the village, were struggling. They had tried to prevent her from leaving, but their attempts had failed. They heard news of her growing bond with the king and felt a mixture of fear, jealousy, and regret. They could not understand why he had chosen her, why she was being celebrated, and why her light seemed impossible to hide. They began to see that their envy had been misplaced, that the world could recognize qualities that they had failed to value. One evening, as she sat in her chamber overlooking the palace gardens, she thought about her village and her family. She realized that she had grown stronger because of her past experiences. The jealousy of her sisters had forced her to cultivate patience, humility, and resilience. Her kindness, once unnoticed, now shone in a way that could not be ignored. She felt grateful for the hardships she had faced, for they had shaped her into someone who could embrace this new life without losing herself. The king, noticing her thoughtful mood, joined her by the window. He spoke quietly. "I can see your heart, even in silence. It is a rare thing, and it shines brighter than any crown or jewel." She blushed, feeling both shy and proud. She realized that he truly saw her, not just her appearance, but her essence. That moment sealed a bond between them, one built on respect, understanding, and a growing affection that neither could deny. As weeks turned into months, their connection deepened. They shared quiet dinners, long walks in the gardens, and conversations that lasted into the night. She taught him about her village, about the small joys of life, and about the importance of kindness and community. He, in turn, shared stories of his responsibilities, his hopes for the kingdom, and his belief in fairness and justice. Together, they discovered a rhythm, a balance, and a comfort that felt almost magical. The villagers began to hear rumors of her life in the palace. Some were amazed, some were skeptical, but most were inspired. They spoke of her courage, her humility, in the way she had stayed true to herself despite being in a world of luxury and power. Young girls looked up to her as an example, learning that true beauty came from the heart, and that kindness and authenticity could open doors that envy and greed could not, even as her life changed so dramatically. She remained aware of her roots. She never forgot the river, the forest, or the people who had shaped her. She sent letters and small gifts back to her village, helping families and sharing news. She encouraged education, kindness, and compassion, reminding everyone that her rise to the palace did not mean forgetting where she came from. Her life had become a bridge between two worlds, the simple, humble village life and the grandeur of the palace, showing that one could embrace both without losing one's identity. Her sisters eventually realized that their attempts to hide her had been futile. They began to reflect on their own actions, feeling a mixture of regret and admiration. They saw that envy had only held them back, while her courage and kindness had propelled her forward. Over time, they softened, learning to appreciate her not just as a sister, but as a person who had shown them the power of goodness, patience, and perseverance. And so, life in the palace continued. With the girl and the king growing closer each day, their bond was built on respect, shared laughter, and mutual admiration. It was a love that neither had expected, yet both cherished deeply. What had begun as a chance encounter in a quiet village had blossomed into something extraordinary, a connection that promised hope, joy, and a future filled with possibility. She had stepped into a world so different from her own, but she did not let it change who she was. She remained gentle, kind, and humble, proving that true beauty lies in the heart and that the right people will always recognize it. The story of the hidden girl and the king was only beginning, but already it was clear that magic had entered her life in the form of love, understanding, and a future full of promise. Life in the palace had taken on a rhythm that the girl was slowly beginning to understand. Each day brought new responsibilities, new faces, and new experiences. It was a world unlike anything she had known, filled with vast halls, glittering chandeliers, and gardens that stretched beyond what her eyes could see. Yet amidst all this grandeur, she never forgot her roots, the quiet village, the river she had walked along, and the simple joys that had shaped her heart. She knew that, in this palace, she had to learn, adapt, and be careful. But she also understood that she could remain herself and still thrive. The king had been patient and kind, guiding her through the complexities of palace life. He never demanded that she change who she was, nor did he treat her as someone lesser or naive. Instead, he encouraged her to explore, to learn, and to speak her mind. Their conversations had grown deeper, touching on matters beyond the ordinary. They talked about fairness in the kingdom, about the people who struggled silently, and about the responsibilities that came with power. She began to see that being with the king was not just about admiration or affection, it was also about partnership, about shared understanding and respect. Despite the warmth between them, the girl felt moments of insecurity. The palace was filled with people who looked down on her because she had come from a humble village. Some servants whispered about her behind her back, and certain courtiers frowned at the idea of a common girl being noticed by the king. It was subtle, but it was there. She sometimes questioned herself, wondering if she truly belonged in a place of such wealth and influence. But each time doubt crept in, the king would notice and offer gentle reassurance. He never boasted of her beauty or status, but instead spoke of her heart, her intelligence, and her courage. One morning, as she walked through the palace gardens, picking herbs for the kitchen, the king joined her. "Do not doubt yourself," he said softly. "You belong here as much as anyone else. You bring something to this place that no wealth or title could ever provide. You bring honesty, kindness, and courage. These are the things that make a person truly royal in spirit." His words touched her deeply. She realized that her place in the palace was not because of her beauty, but because of who she was. It was a lesson she had never learned before, that true worth is measured by heart and actions, not appearances or wealth. As days turned into weeks, the king introduced her to the workings of the kingdom. He showed her the problems people faced, from farmers struggling to pay taxes to children who had no access to education. Together, they discussed ideas, solutions, and ways to help. She listened carefully, offering her thoughts, sometimes timidly, sometimes boldly. The king valued her opinions, and slowly, she realized that he saw her not as a girl to be admired, but as a partner whose voice mattered. This realization filled her with both confidence and purpose. Meanwhile, her sisters were far away, still trying to comprehend what had happened. Their envy had not lessened, though it had begun to soften into a complicated mix of guilt and admiration. They watched from a distance as news of her life in the palace trickled back to the village. Some days they admitted quietly that they had been wrong to try and hide her. They began to understand that the girl they had tried to keep in the shadows had qualities that no one could ever suppress. She had a courage and goodness that could not be hidden. Now the world was seeing it, just as the king had. The palace itself began to change because of her. Her presence brought a sense of warmth and calm that had been missing for years. Staff who had long been indifferent to palace life found themselves smiling more, laughing more, and even taking greater care in their work. Gardens flourished under her attention, and animals in the courtyard grew healthier and more playful. People noticed the difference, and slowly, the whispers of doubt and envy faded into curiosity and respect. She had not sought power or admiration, but her actions, small as they were, had begun to create ripples that touched everyone around her. One afternoon, while walking through the palace library, the girl stumbled upon a collection of letters written by previous queens and royal advisors. She read through them, fascinated by their words of wisdom, advice, and personal reflections. One letter in particular caught her attention. It spoke about kindness, humility, and the importance of staying true to oneself amidst the pressures of wealth and power. She felt a connection to the writer, realizing that these lessons were timeless. She understood that she, too, could leave a mark. Not by seeking attention, but by living honestly and helping others. The king noticed her interest and joined her at a table. Watching her eyes scan the letters, "Do you see yourself in these words?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yes," she replied. "I feel that these things matter more than any crown or title. That is what I want to carry with me." He smiled, his gaze softening. "Then you already possess what many spend a lifetime searching for. You have the heart of a queen, even if you are only beginning to see it." Their growing bond was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, disagreements, and misunderstandings. Sometimes the girl felt overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon her. Sometimes the king struggled to balance his affection for her with his duties. But in every moment of tension, they found a way back to each other. They spoke openly, listened carefully, and made room for each other's fears and dreams. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, grounded in respect, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. The villagers, hearing tales of her time in the palace, began to see her as a symbol of hope. Mothers told their children about the girl who had stayed kind and humble despite envy and hardship. Young women found inspiration in her story, learning that courage, honesty, and compassion could open doors that talent or beauty alone could not. She became a bridge between her humble village and the grandeur of the palace, proving that the values of everyday life could exist even in a world of wealth and power. One evening, as the sun set over the palace gardens, the girl and the king walked quietly along a path lined with flowering trees. The air was filled with the scent of roses and jasmine. They spoke softly, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, and the things that had shaped them. She told him about the river, the village festivals, and the small acts of kindness she had always tried to practice. He listened, fascinated, and shared his own memories, painting a picture of a life filled with responsibility but also with moments of quiet reflection and longing. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of connection. She realized that their love was not only about attraction or admiration, but about understanding, trust, and shared values. She felt safe, seen, and respected in a way that allowed her to grow and flourish. It was a love that nurtured her spirit, giving her confidence to embrace her new life fully. while never forgetting the lessons of her past. The palace, too, began to reflect the changes she brought. Banquets became more inclusive, and the king encouraged her to participate in decision-making. People who had once doubted her began to see her as a wise and compassionate presence. The girl's influence was subtle but powerful. She showed that leadership was not about asserting power or demanding obedience, but about listening, caring, and inspiring others to do their best. Her sisters eventually could no longer ignore the truth. They began to hear accounts of her contributions, her courage, and the respect she commanded in the palace. Slowly, their envy turned into a complicated mix of guilt and admiration. They realized that no amount of jealousy could have suppressed her light, and that their attempts to hide her beauty and goodness had only delayed what was inevitable. It was a painful lesson, but one that ultimately led them to reflect on their own behavior and to appreciate the girl they had once tried to overshadow. The girl herself remained humble and grounded. She did not seek fame, power, or recognition. She continued to write letters to her village, sending small gifts and words of encouragement. She remembered the people who had shaped her, the simple joys of life, and the quiet moments of reflection that had given her strength. She knew that her life had changed dramatically, but she also knew that she could remain true to herself, and that doing so was what made her powerful and respected in ways that went beyond wealth or status. For the first time, many courtiers and nobles saw her not just as a beautiful girl from a village, but as a capable, compassionate, and inspiring presence in the palace. During the festival, she caught sight of a group of young girls from the village who had come with their families. Their eyes widened as they recognized her, and they whispered excitedly among themselves. She smiled at them, remembering her own childhood, and felt a wave of emotion. She realized that her journey had become larger than herself, that she was now a symbol of possibility for others. She had stayed true to herself, helped others, and remained kind, and in doing so, she had created hope and inspiration for many who had never imagined such a life was possible. The king watched her quietly, admiring not just her beauty, but her courage, wisdom, and generosity. He realized that he had found a partner who could share not only love, but vision and purpose. Together, they could make a difference, lead with integrity, and create a life that was meaningful, fulfilling, and transformative. He felt grateful that fate had brought them together, that her light had shone through the shadows of envy and fear, and that they had found a connection that was rare, deep, and genuine. As the sun set and the festival ended, the girl and the king walked hand in hand through the quiet gardens. The air was filled with the soft sounds of the evening, and the sky glowed with the last light of the day. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, a feeling that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey from a hidden village girl to a trusted companion of the king had been filled with challenges, but it had also been filled with discovery, growth, and love. She realized that her heart had guided her, and that following it had led her to a life far beyond what she had imagined. The palace, once a place of strict rules and distant authority, had become a home. The girl had brought warmth, kindness, and humanity into its halls. The people around her had begun to see that true power comes not from titles or wealth, but from character, courage, and compassion. And the king, who had recognized her heart from the very beginning, had found not just love, but a partner who shared his vision, his values, and his hope for the future. In those quiet moments, walking through the gardens as night fell, the girl knew that her life had been transformed not because of magic or chance alone, but because she had remained true to herself. She had faced envy, doubt, and uncertainty, yet she had persevered with kindness, courage, and humility. And in return, she had found a love that was real, deep, and enduring, a love that would shape the rest of her life and inspire those around her to believe in the power of goodness, honesty, and heart. The palace had never felt more alive. The gardens glowed with flowers in full bloom, laughter echoed through the halls, and the people who served within its walls moved with a sense of pride and joy that had been missing before. The girl had grown into her new life with grace and humility, yet she carried a confidence born from experience, courage, and kindness. She had become more than a visitor in the palace. She had become a part of its heart, touching everyone around her with her warmth and humanity. The king and the girl had grown closer with each passing day. Their love was steady, deep, and filled with mutual respect. He admired her courage, her intelligence, and her ability to bring joy to even the smallest moments. She admired his patience, wisdom, and his willingness to listen, truly listen, to her thoughts and ideas. Together, they were more than a couple. In love, they were partners, sharing a vision for the kingdom. It's a life built on trust and a hope that good deeds could change the world. Even as their bond deepened, the girl remained mindful of her past. She remembered the quiet village she had left behind, the river, the fields, and the people whose lives had shaped her. She knew that her journey had begun in simplicity, and that the lessons she had learned there were what allowed her to navigate the complexities of palace life. She wrote letters to her village regularly, sending gifts, encouragement, and news. She wanted them to know that their influence had mattered and that kindness, even in small acts, could ripple outward in ways they might never imagine. Her sisters, too, had begun to change. They had watched from afar, feeling a mixture of envy, regret, and admiration. Over time, they realized that their jealousy had been misplaced and that it had only delayed what was inevitable. The girl they had once tried to hide had grown into someone remarkable, not because of wealth or beauty, but because of character, courage, and compassion. Eventually, they sought her out, first hesitantly, then with genuine apologies and admiration. She welcomed them quietly, showing that forgiveness and understanding were as much a part of her strength as her kindness. The king encouraged these reconciliations, seeing the value of family and the healing power of understanding. He watched as the girl forgave, not with words alone, but through actions and acceptance. Her sisters began to participate more in the lives of the villagers, inspired by the example she had set. The girl's influence was spreading, not just in the palace, but in the world around her. She had become a bridge, connecting the simplicity and honesty of her village to the grandeur and responsibility of the kingdom. One morning, the king asked her to walk with him through the palace grounds. They moved slowly, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the gentle rustle of the trees. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her to a quiet courtyard she had not explored before. In the center was a small fountain, surrounded by flowers she had never planted. "This is for you," he said softly. "A place where you can think, reflect, and simply be yourself. You have changed this palace and my life in ways I could never have imagined." She felt a surge of emotion. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being seen, understood, and appreciated. She realized that this life, which had once seemed so far beyond her reach, was now a place where she could grow, contribute, and love freely. She held the king's hand, feeling the strength of his support and the sincerity of his admiration. In that moment, she understood that love was not just about emotion, but about partnership, trust, and shared vision. As days passed, the girl and the king worked together to improve the lives of the people in their kingdom. They visited villages, listened to the struggles of farmers and merchants, and implemented changes that brought relief and hope. Education became a priority. Healthcare improvements were introduced, and resources were distributed more fairly. The girl's perspective, grounded in her own humble beginnings, allowed them to see problems differently and create solutions that were both practical and compassionate. The kingdom began to flourish, not just in wealth, but in happiness, trust, and community. The villagers who had once watched her leave in envy now saw her as a symbol of hope. Stories of her kindness, wisdom, and courage spread far and wide. Children spoke of her with awe, women admired her strength, and even those who had doubted her began to recognize her impact. She remained humble, never seeking attention or accolades, but the world noticed anyway. Her life had become a testament to the idea that true greatness comes not from status or beauty, but from heart, integrity, and the courage to remain oneself. Her sisters, who had once been her greatest obstacles, now became her allies. They visited the palace more frequently, learning from her example and bringing small acts of kindness back to the village. Over time, they found satisfaction not in envy, but in contribution. Their relationship, once strained by jealousy, grew into something supportive and loving. The girl had taught them, without preaching, that love and compassion were stronger than fear and envy. One afternoon, as the sun bathed the palace gardens, in golden light, the king took her hand and led her to a balcony overlooking the kingdom. "Look at this," he said softly. "All of this and more can be better because of what we do together. Your heart, your courage, and your vision are a gift to this kingdom. You have changed it, and in doing so, you have changed me." Gazed out at the kingdom, the villages, the rivers, and the fields she had once walked through, a sense of fulfillment washed over her. She realized that life had brought her here not by chance, but through the choices she had made, choices to be kind, courageous, and true to herself. She understood that her beauty, once hidden by envy, had been just a small part of what made her extraordinary. The real magic had always been in her heart. Evenings in the palace became moments of quiet reflection. She would sit with the king by the fountain, watching the stars appear one by one in the sky. They spoke about dreams, hopes, and the future, imagining a kingdom where compassion and justice guided every decision. The girl felt a sense of peace she had never known in her village. She had faced envy, doubt, and uncertainty, yet she had persevered with patience and kindness. Now, she could see the fruits of her courage and the love that had grown from it. The palace staff, once indifferent or skeptical, now looked to her as a leader in subtle ways. They observed how she treated others, how she remained calm in difficult situations, and how she listened to everyone, regardless of status. Her influence was quiet, yet profound,